Map design basics and principles to help prevent map catastrophes. Map design is a process that has been standardized but is still open to creativity. We will discuss how maps have an intrinsic grammar that must be used effectively. The goal of each map is to communicate a message or story. It's similar to how we take in most information, whether it's a book or advertisement or news article. We want the map reader to understand the message without overwhelming them with unnecessary information. So we have some cartographic basics. We have the who. Who is the intended audience? What? What information needs to be conveyed? When? Is this a moment in time or a longitudinal evaluation? Where? What is the geographic extent? And how? How can I best represent this information? Once we have identified the whom, what, where, and how of our map's purpose, we can focus on cartographic design decisions, which we must consider each time we make a map. These include on-the-map elements, body of the map, the scale of the map, and direction or orientation. Secondly, they include what is near or around the map, additional or explanatory information of the data that is displayed in the body of the map. So we have some common things that we have are the title, legend, neat line, and credits. First, we'll talk about the body of the map. You want the body of the map to be as large as reasonably possible. This is because it's the main focus and it needs to draw the eye first. As we can see here in this map, this here is the body of the map. And down here we have all of that, all the secondary outside of the map elements. So within that screen, the body of the map and the map data is taking up most of the space. Again, we could see here in this map, we have our big map with as much of the data displayed as possible. We even have part of the ocean, and we have those smaller map elements tucked away in the corner. Definitely the secondary information that you should be taking in. The first thing that the map reader's eye should lie on is that map data. So the second thing that we'll talk about is scale. Scale defines the scope of the map. The most simplified way to think about scale is how far in or out you are zoomed in on the map data. So you can think, is the map displaying a neighborhood block in the middle of Los Angeles, or are we looking at the entire city of Los Angeles? There are three different types of scale. We have verbal scale, which uses a word statement to express scale. Verbal scale is reserved for more casual maps where accuracy is not as important, such as tourist maps. If you ever have stopped at any type of tourist location, let's say like state parks, for example, of course you could purchase very detailed and accurate tourist maps, but a lot of the times they'll have just like a free paper map with big flashy images and distorted views of what the land actually looks like to be able to get to and from, just to kind of highlight either like different restaurants in the area or different types of tourist attractions, rather than displaying an accurate representation of the ground. Okay, so we also have representative fraction, which is the relationship between the map distance over ground and is usually represented as a ratio. You'll see sometimes on the map, or even when you're using the ArcMap program, you'll see, for example, 1 inch on the map equals 10 miles on the ground. And so you could see that represented with a colon or ratio, or you could see it represented as a fraction. Graphic scale is a graphic symbol, usually a scale bar, that represents ground distance on the map. Map readers can use this graphic as a reference when wanting to measure distance on the map itself. We'll go further into scale when we get to chapter 4 in the text. We also need to talk about direction. So you need to orient your reader. Sometimes it can be omitted if it's a really familiar landmass, and we'll go over that in the next couple of slides. Most of the time you'll need to orient your map. North does not necessarily have to be up, but most people expect it. You don't normally see a map of the United States in the south orientation. It would be almost confusing. You would be able to figure it out, but just as good measure, it's usually always to have north is up, south is down, and then, west as left and east is right. Two principal methods. So we never want to have both. You need to choose one or the other. And that's north arrow and graticule, and we'll go over that in just a second. So a north arrow you want to include when there's an unusual orientation, just to help people really know which way is up. So again, you want to include when the direction is not obvious. It's best for large scale maps where direction is applicable in more places. Large scale means like really zoomed in, like on a neighborhood or a section of city, and you really want to know your north, south, east, and west directions. It can be really creative. You'll notice in ArcMap that there's a bunch of different options for your north arrow. You want to be really careful when selecting a north arrow when you're designing your map, because you don't want it to be so distractive and flashy where it's taking the attention away from that map data, which should always be the most important part of your map. There's different reasons where you could use, or different types of maps where you could use a more flashy or eccentric north title, like if you're doing a certain type of thematic map, or if you're making a map for a private company. And also something that you'll come across in working in the field, whenever you're working with a different agency, let's say you're doing some kind of consultant work, you really have to design the map based off of what the consultant wants or what the employer wants you to do. So you could have years and years of experience in map design and what quote unquote should be on a map, and then you have somebody who's paying you who is insisting on a flashy north arrow. You just kind of have to slap it in. Okay. So the other option for orientation is the use of a graticule. The graticule is lines of latitude and longitude used to reference the Earth. It's the preferred method for indicating direction on small scale maps, or when you're zoomed really far out, when that direction is more obvious, as we can see here in this map of Africa. They're using the graticule to determine north, south, and east and west by longitude and latitude. And a north arrow isn't necessarily needed because it's just already known. So again, if we look at this map of Europe, does a north arrow make sense on this map? Not really. This is a pretty common display of the Europe continent, and you have that graticule, so that as latitude goes up, we go north and south, and as the longitudinal lines going east and west are determining those directions. And because this is such a common image, most people understand that Italy is south of Great Britain or the UK. Okay, so let's talk about map title a little bit. So the title needs to be succinct, a succinct description of the map's subject matter. It should be informative, concise, attention-getting, and it can be omitted if it's part of a larger content. So let's say you've embedded a map into a report or article. If the report is describing the map, you don't necessarily have to have a title in it, especially if you have a caption that goes along with that map, then the title is implied in that caption. So let's look at a couple of examples. So here we have a map where the title is "The Status of Legalization of Medical Marijuana in the United States." When you start to look at this map more closely, you can see how redundant that and over-explanatory that title is. And it's just taking up too much attention and time of the map reader having to read that title along with all of the other information that is on this map. So it would be a really simple fix. You just make that really concise, informative title, and then it'll allow your map reader to then focus on the different map elements. So in this example here, you know, the map title is explaining way too much. So it's saying percent of California, or percent of children in poverty, income below 21,000 for a family of 2 adults and 2 children in 2009. I mean, even just to read that out loud was difficult. And then there's all these other elements of the map that are not explained. So really your title needs to be really short and concise, and then you should then have other descriptive text down here and titles for the other information on the map. And so we can see that here we have a really clear and short title, Children in Poverty, and then the rest of that information is distributed in the rest of the map and in those map or supporting map elements. So let's get into legends. Legends are the decoder for the symbology in the data frame. We never want to use the word legend to identify the legend. If the legend needs to be identified at all, it should be describing the information that's provided in the legend. The legend is self-explanatory. You don't need that in the title. So again, the legend should contain a description of all unclear items on the map. The symbol should always come before the description in the legend, and the symbol should always be the same size in the legend as it appears on the map. So here's just a quick example of what your legend shouldn't and should look like. So again, you don't want to have that legend title there. If it needs a title, you should be describing each section of the data of the maps. So there are a few cartographic conventions to follow. If you follow these, you can reduce the number of things in your legend. Line features should be represented by lines, points by points, and areas by a polygon of some sort. Water is blue, and all water bodies are labeled in italics. So this is just a standard example for blue. You could also look up other standards for other things, such as like trees and streets and stuff like that. Other features should not be represented by the color blue, and water features are the only things labeled in italics. So the last thing that we'll go over in this video is credits. We rarely create maps from scratch, so you need to be able to cite your sources, just like if you're writing a report. It'll let your readers know whether the sources on your map are legitimate and timely. It also ensures that you are a part of that map process. If you're creating a map, you should include your name and the date that you created it. You deserve credit too. Other information may be relevant. Consider the projection and coordinate system, and we'll get more into what those actually are in future modules. It also avoids plagiarism and copyright infringement. You really want to cite your sources. Okay, so that wraps up this video. There will be more videos for this module uploaded on Wednesday, September 9th, and Thursday, September 10th.